Hi, everyone. Welcome to our podcast. I'm Sarah, and with me is Alex. Today, we're diving into a game-changing framework for service excellence, the GAPS model of service quality.
That's right. This model helps companies pinpoint where they might be falling short in delivering on customer expectations. Often, these gaps are subtle but can make a big difference in customer satisfaction.
Let's start with the basics. The GAPS model focuses on closing the customer gap, which is the difference between what customers expect and what they actually experience. This gap can cause disappointment and impact loyalty.
Yes, and understanding this gap is crucial. For example, when you book a luxury hotel room, you expect a high level of comfort, quick service, and amenities that go above and beyond. If the hotel misses on any of these, the customer gap opens. The GAPS model breaks this down further by identifying provider gaps, which are internal to the company and contribute to that customer disappointment.
Exactly. There are 4 provider gaps, and each one is a different reason why companies might fall short of delivering great service. So let's go through them in detail. The first provider gap is the listening gap, which happens when a company doesn't fully understand what its customers want. This often occurs because companies don't gather enough feedback or misinterpret the data they do have.
I think this gap is one of the most common. For example, Netflix learned early on that customers didn't just want access to movies. They also wanted original content. By listening carefully, Netflix expanded into original programming, which helped them keep customers engaged.
Another great example is Lego. In the early 2000s, Lego started losing relevance because they weren't listening to customers who wanted more innovation. When Lego started engaging customers through forums and workshops, they created products like Mindstorms, which cater to tech-savvy kids and adults.
Yes, to avoid the listening gap, companies need a continuous feedback loop. Another good example is Airbnb. They use surveys after every stay to understand what guests liked and didn't like. And they actually use this data to update policies and enhance customer experience.
Next, we have the service design and standards gap, which occurs when a company knows what customers want but fails to design services that meet those expectations.
Yes, this gap often happens when service standards are too generic or not aligned with customer needs. Think about healthcare. Many clinics know patients want shorter wait times, but without the right scheduling and check-in processes, they can't deliver on this expectation.
Another classic example is in retail. For instance, a clothing store might know that customers want easy returns, but if their return process is slow or inconvenient, customers feel frustrated. Zara, on the other hand, excels here. Their entire store layout, stock turnover, and customer service standards are built around customer feedback on what makes a convenient shopping experience.
That's a great point. And even in tech, we see this. Google designed its search engine with a focus on speed and simplicity, directly responding to what users wanted. By focusing on fast-loading pages and minimal distractions, Google became the preferred search engine worldwide.
Exactly. Companies need to ask themselves, are service standards truly customer-focused? When companies set standards around customer priorities, they're much more likely to close this gap. Moving on to provider gap 3, the service performance gap. This gap arises when a company has designed good standards but doesn't perform consistently.
Yes, consistency is key here. Think about fast food chains like McDonald's that they're known for standardizing their service, yet some locations still fall short on cleanliness or speed, which opens this gap. If one branch fails to uphold the brand standards, it affects customer perception across all locations.
Definitely. And this can also happen in the airline industry. For example, Southwest Airlines is known for friendly service, but if a particular crew is unhelpful or rude, that inconsistency harms the brand's image. Southwest tackles this by investing heavily in employee training and internal culture, making sure staff are empowered to deliver good service every time.
Another example is the Ritz-Carlton. They have very high standards, but they close the service performance gap by empowering employees to act independently to solve issues for guests on the spot. This consistency in employee actions ensures customers get the same high-quality experience across locations.
So true, Alex. The takeaway here is that companies need to continually train and monitor their teams to maintain performance standards. Regular evaluations and feedback loops can help minimize this gap. Finally, we have the communication gap. This gap happens when there's a disconnect between what a company promises and what it actually delivers. Essentially, it's when marketing paints an unrealistic picture.
Absolutely. A good example here is in tourism. Many resorts advertise serene, pristine beaches, but when customers arrive, they may find overcrowded spaces or areas under construction. This type of miscommunication often happens because marketing teams don't update information based on the actual on-the-ground experience.
Yes, or even fitness centers. Sometimes gyms promise no wait time for equipment or 100% personalized plans, but they don't have the resources or staff to keep up with demand. This leads to disappointment and distrust among customers. Planet Fitness, for instance, does a good job by focusing their messaging on their judgment-free environment, which is realistic and achievable, and something they actively implement.
That's a great point. A famous example of managing the communication gap is Amazon. They're very transparent about delivery times, and they communicate delays immediately. Customers are less likely to be disappointed if they're kept informed, even if there's a problem.
Exactly. To close the communication gap, companies need to ensure marketing messages are aligned with what the operations team can deliver. This requires regular alignment meetings between teams so that promises match capabilities.
Now that we've walked through each gap, it's clear how these internal gaps contribute to the overall customer gap. By addressing each provider gap, companies can close the customer gap, delivering on what they promise.
Exactly. And that's what leads to better customer satisfaction and loyalty. When customers feel a company understands their needs, sets up effective service processes, performs consistently, and communicates realistically, they're far more likely to stay loyal.
Loyalty is key. Think about Trader Joe's, which is known for listening to customers, having a unique store design, training staff for friendly service, and being clear about product availability, that they're one of the most beloved grocery chains because they close the customer gap so well.
Absolutely, Alex. This model provides a clear framework for companies aiming to improve service quality. If leaders look closely at each of these gaps and make small adjustments, they can make a huge difference in customer experience. So, for anyone managing or working in a customer service-focused business, take a moment to reflect on each of these gaps. Closing just one gap can significantly improve customer satisfaction.
Yes, and remember, the gaps model isn't a one-time fix, that it's an ongoing process. As customer needs evolve, companies need to keep listening, refining, and aligning their service with customer expectations. Thanks for joining us today.